Hello everybody, today is Wednesday the 29th of August. We've got a lot of gaming news to get through today, but first, before we do, I didn't really get a lot of sleep last night, I'll be honest. I stayed up all night worrying where the sun had gone, but eventually it dawned on me. Thanks to Gamera from the PGG Discord on the Dad Jokes channel for that awesome bit of dad jokes to kick us off today. Let's talk about some games. Spider-Man for PS4 is right around the corner, with its release slated for September the 7th. Yesterday, developers Insomniac announced details of its plans for DLC post-launch. The City That Never Sleeps DLC pack will feature 3 individual episodes. They will release in October, November and December of this year. Each episode will feature brand new story missions and challenges, a new faction of enemies, and more Spidey costumes to unlock. The first episode will focus on Felicia Hardy, better known as Black Cat. And while we don't have full details on the other 2 episodes, we know it will cost £24.99 for all 3 episodes, or £9.99 individually. However, after the news of the DLC dropped yesterday, the game has seen a bit of backlash from the fans, claiming that the DLC is just cut content and shouldn't have been announced before the game's release. With one fan saying, wait, Spider-Man PS4 isn't even out yet and they're already announcing DLC? Just put it in the damn game we're paying $60 for. Another guy saying, the game went gold 4 weeks ago today and you're planning a DLC only 8 weeks after its release. Is this okay? Let me tell you, it isn't. Insomniac did announce plans for DLC back in April, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that there is DLC at all. It's just the details which are upsetting a few people. And you can kind of understand some people getting upset, feeling that they're not getting value for money when it looks like part of the game has been sliced off and being sold back to them again in future. And of course, with the DLC coming just a month after release, unless when the first one comes, it looks particularly suspicious. They could literally just wait a month and stick that DLC on the disc, just like Capcom have been known to do in the past. The counter argument to this, of course, is that the money that you pay for the DLC, that's the money that funds the development costs of this DLC itself. And if they weren't charging for the DLC, then it would never exist because, you know, they wouldn't have the money to be able to develop it. I think the problem that a lot of people see is that when DLC is being developed at the same time as the actual game, people feel like it's being ripped out of the game. Or they could just easily add it to the final game itself and give you a more complete, more money for value for money package. And with all the talk these days about how expensive games are to make, and that $60 probably isn't fair these days for the price of a game, it should be something more like $80. Maybe people would prefer the DLC and all the game, all the content, just for $80 outright, and not even offer the kind of the scaled back version or the base version for $60, because that's essentially what it is now. It's a cheap version of the game. You're getting for $60. You're not getting everything with. That's just the way that things are. This is the business model that they've got here. But how I feel about it is that they're asking you to pre-order the DLC without actually telling you what's in the second and the third pack. You don't know what you're getting for your money. You don't know how much value for money you're getting. You would hope that for 25 quid for the whole DLC pack, you would get half the content of the game, since the game is 50 quid, right? But that's not usually how it works out. The fact that they're selling you the DLC pack in the first place without telling you what is in it, that is shady, right? You shouldn't do that. You should never pre-order something without knowing what you're getting. And that's where you have to decide whether this is a business model that you want to support in this industry right now. There are other ways of doing it. People have shown that there are loads of other ways of doing it than this. One thing I will say is that if you are in the habit of pre-ordering games and DLC before they've announced everything that's in it, don't be surprised when you're disappointed at the end of it. You don't get everything. You feel like you've been ripped off in some way. You should always know exactly what you're getting for your money. Wait for the reviews of the game. Wait until you know everything of the game. The game isn't going anywhere. You can still buy it on day one if you want. You don't have to give them your money beforehand. You just don't have to. And don't be tempted by all that shady marketing tactics, like giving you exclusive skins and exclusive content if you pre-order. Just give me your money now and I'll give you all this shady stuff. I'll slice all this content off for you. That's really shady. That shouldn't be supported in this industry. They only want your money and they'll do pretty much anything to get it. Shady as you like. Buyer beware is what I'm saying. Just beware. But those are just my thoughts. If you have any of your own, drop them down in the comments. Let's get a discussion going. Let's talk this thing out. Be nice to one another though, guys. We don't need to be shitty in the comments to each other, because There's just enough shit in the world, let's be honest. And next up, Bethesda Studios' Pete Hines was in attendance at this year's Gamescom, drumming up interest for Fallout 76. As we all know, the big selling point behind the next Fallout game is the online gameplay element, meaning that for the first time in Fallout's history, you can take on the wastelands, with your mates. However, while the multiplayer aspect may be of interest, it isn't where Hines' loyalty lies. Speaking to IGN, Hines said how his preference is for playing alone. And while the game will feature a multiplayer experience, Hines has insisted that there is something there for people who like the moody solo exploration of previous Fallout games. I just go out and explore. I decide whether I'm going to try and do some big quest or a personal quest like putting a scope on a rifle I just went through the trouble to repair. I'm in this world where I'm trying to survive and I feel like I'm alone. I feel like I'm playing Fallout by myself. And what's more, Fallout 76 apparently won't force the group dynamic option onto you if you decide to go down that route. It's kind of loose and fluid, and whatever you want to be, as opposed to no, you're all together, so you can't be more than 100 feet from each other at any given point. I don't know, that's where it feels like. It feels like a Fallout game that you're playing with your friends. And on the topic of replayability in single player games, Hines said the following: "We have a joke in the office. I have banned the word replayable because that's not a feature. Every game is replayable. Tetris is replayable." Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that, Pete. A lot of things are replayable. A lot of things are shit. It doesn't make them good, right? Funny coming from a Bethesda rap, considering that Bethesda games, the single player games, are well known for the replayability. They're just like Skyrim, for example. It's the biggest and best example of a Bethesda game out there. You can play that game for hours and hours, endlessly, finding new quests and new parts of the map or whatever. It's just a great example of replayability. The fact that he's banned the word replayability in the office, it's a bit weird. That's something that they should probably be focusing on, right? I am hungry. Anybody else hungry? First up in today's news nuggets, Xbox games with gold for September have been announced. The games include Prison Architect, Lego Star Wars 3, Livelock, and Sega Vintage Collection Monster World. We had Nintendo showing off their upcoming lineup of indie games during the Nindies showcase yesterday. Some of the highlights include the following: Bastion and Transistor are both heading to the Switch on September the 13th and November the 1st respectively. Untitled Goose Game, a game where you play as a goose and your sole objective is to cause as much chaos as possible, was announced. And lastly, out of the blue came the announcement that Into the Breach is coming to Switch, or rather available right effing now on the Switch. So in total there were 22 announcements and release dates shown off. It's all linked down in the description for you if you want to go and check it out. Next up, if you ever want to know what KK Slider would sound like covering Africa by Toto, well, you're in luck. Somebody on Twitter made it happen. And Shovel Knight is finally starring in its own Smash clone. Shovel Knight Showdown was announced as a free update for owners of Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. Hit the spot. Next up, let's talk about the Xbox Game Pass, which was launched in June of last year. The service offers around 100 games, with the library being regularly updated, as well as offering access to all of Microsoft's exclusives on the day that they launch. Well, there have been fears that these Netflix-style subscriptions are damaging developers, especially if they become the mainstay in the future of gaming. Speaking to GamesIndustry.biz, head of gaming services Ben Decker and Game Pass head of planning Matt Percy made some interesting comments that should quell these fears. Decker said, quote, "An ever-increasing number of titles might be something that was really important to gamers. Instead, they found that players, quote, want a subscription with 100 or a little more than 100 games, and that they, quote, want them to be really good games. It even seems as though the Game Pass isn't trying to mimic Netflix, saying that they, quote, don't have a goal of being the subscription where you get all your content. This is meant to be additive to the ecosystem. We don't see a future where subscriptions are dominant." One of the more notable comments to be made, however, was the stats that they shared. On average, Game Pass members have increased their time spent gaming on Xbox by about 20%, with a significant portion spent playing non-Game Pass games. The number of games they have played increased by 40%, with increased purchasing and engaging with titles outside the Game Pass service. So what do you reckon are subscription type models like this the future? These guys work for Xbox and they don't seem to think so, because they still see it as a portion of games they're offering, not the whole spectrum of games. They're just offering something very specific, which I guess I can get behind. Netflix offers just something for everybody, whereas this maybe isn't it. Like, what is the difference? Is that even a valid comparison? I don't know. Have you guys have any experience with this service? Are you happy with it? Do you see it as the future or not? Let me know down in the comments. Unlike past games that From Software have developed, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice won't be published by Bandai Namco. Instead, they're going with Activision. At Gamescom, Robert Conkey from Activision told GamesIndustry.biz that when From Software knocks on your door and says, hey, we want to make a game, you only have one answer, right? Perhaps what was more interesting was what From Software community manager Yasuhiro Kitao had to say about where the game started. As an installment in the Tenchu franchise, which From Software owns the rights to. Kitao said that it started becoming its own thing, and the game we wanted to make was no longer Tenchu, so it really evolved into its own thing. Back in the day when it was just teased, people saying it was Bloodborne 2, people saying Dark Souls 4, whatever. A lot of people said Tenchu. The fact that it did start out as Tenchu, but then it evolved into something on its own, something else, that's really cool because Tenchu was awesome. Tenchu, man. Stealth assassin. You got any interest in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice? Let me know down in the comments. So that's it for today's daily dose of gaming news. I'll be back again tomorrow at the same time. Hit the bell if you want to be notified when the video goes live. I will see you then. Bye for now.